Hello, and welcome to another episode of EKU Online's eCast series. EKU Online's mission is to change lives by providing access to affordable and high-quality degree programs in meaningful disciplines that positively impact our society. We thank you for joining us. Today, we are joined by Dr. Dana Howell, who is the chair of the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy at Eastern Kentucky University. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Occupational Therapy from Colorado State University, a doctorate in occupational therapy from Creighton University, and a PhD in adult education from the University of Idaho. Her clinical and research interests include interprofessional practice and education, qualitative research, and rehabilitation. Dr. Howell is the founding editor of the Journal of Occupational Therapy Education. She has been recognized as an EKU Foundation professor and roster of fellows in the American Occupational Therapy Association. Welcome, Dr. Howell. It's been a long time. It's good to see you again. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you too.
As we begin our discussion, Dr. Howell, please share with us your various roles in the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy. You wear a lot of hats. I know you're the chair, you're a professor, you're also a founding editor for the discipline-specific journal. So tell me, what have we missed? And how do you manage to juggle all these roles?
Well, good question. I think first and foremost, I'm an occupational therapist. That's probably my primary role. That's where I started my career way back in 1992. When I came out of school, you just had to have a bachelor's degree to practice. So I was out working as an OT by the time I was 21. And, you know, being an OT, I always say once an OT, always an OT. Doesn't matter what your actual job title is anymore, because it just really shapes your worldview and the lens by which I view everything. So I find that OTs tend to be interested in a lot of different topics, and we want to understand people and kind of what makes them tick, what's meaningful to them. And we want to help people be as functional and independent as possible and have a good quality of life. And so as an OT, I spent time teaching my clients how to do new skills and techniques all the time. And that's a really great fit with my academic role, luckily. So it fits well with my teaching hat, even my other roles of being a department chair and a journal editor. And kind of along those lines, another of my roles is being a mentor. I think that's one of the most important things I do. I really do a lot to help graduate students, new faculty, new authors. I feel like I spend a lot of my time working with people, helping them to, sort of take their learning to the next level and advance their career. So that's a big role for me. I do have a lot of roles, and I think when you list them out, one by one, they seem very separate. But for me, I see them all as so intertwined and just entangled with one another. So, I mean, everything that I find myself taking on from teaching, advising, scholarship, service, administration, all of these things are wrapped around my primary goal of helping students to learn and have a good academic experience. And kind of hand in hand with that is my goal of helping improve my profession of occupational therapy. The stronger the profession of OT, the better world I'm sending my students out into. And so that kind of helps me decide what to take on, what to say no to. It just gives me kind of boundaries in my head about what I'm doing here. What's the point of it all? And I think that being in academia is definitely a juggling act. I think that was a good phrase you used. And the only way to really be successful in juggling all those different hats is to understand how they're all related.
We understand you to be a professor who takes engagement with your online students very seriously, of course, with your on-campus students, but there's definitely a difference in the approaches and the way in which you have to do that. So could you please just take a minute or two, just tell us how you do that and why you think it's so important?
Yeah, I really do think engagement is critical. If students aren't engaged in the course content, but also the broader program that they're enrolled in, or if they don't have those sort of personal and professional connections with their classmates or their faculty, I just don't think they get that much out of the program. It's more just checking the box, like, yes, I took the class, or yes, I did the assignment. And that's not what we're about in our program. We really want people who take our courses and enroll in our programs to have that transformative experience that, education really can provide. And it's hard to explain that to students if they haven't experienced it. But it is very transformative. You learn things about yourself and about the topics that you're studying that you just can't even imagine before you take the courses. So I do think engagement is really critical to that happening. And it means that you've got to set up a classroom that is comfortable and safe for students to put themselves out there and take some risks in their learning. So I think that students sometimes come to online learning with a stereotypical or even confused view of what it is or what it's going to be. I mean, I think there's still that sense of, oh, it's like a correspondence course. I just do the stuff and then I turn it in and then I'm done. And so I try to set this tone very early on for engagement, that there's more to it than just doing assignments. It is like an actual in-person class in that you're engaging. And our courses are primarily asynchronous. And so even with that, you want them to feel like they're engaged anytime they're logged in and looking at the material. You want them to feel like they're part of a larger classroom. So I think it's important to set that expectation from day one. One of the things we do in our program, in our post-professional occupational therapy doctorate program, which is fully online, we do a personal individual orientation for every student that comes into the program. So as soon as they enroll and are accepted, then they're going to get a one-on-one meeting with our program coordinator, and she's going to talk about this is how the course is run, this is what you can expect, this is what virtual office is, this is how you get your questions answered. So students know from day one what to expect, how to engage, and they know where to go for help too. And I think that does a lot to alleviate the anxiety that students have as they're coming into the program for the first time. The other thing I think that's kind of challenging about online learning is, or different than in-person learning, is in in-person learning, you can read the room. When I've got a classroom of students out in front of me, I can see when everybody has their confused face, or they're yawning. I get that and I can adjust accordingly. But in an online course, especially an asynchronous one, it is harder to see that and to read the room. And so you've got to really have some tools in place to be able to do that. So for example, I always do real-time office hours. We have virtual office hours, but I also do real-time office hours so that students have a chance where if they just want to talk to me and ask their questions, they've got that opportunity. And that helps a lot. I find that students like to come on in groups and just listen. They're like, what am I going to miss? You might say something to them that I didn't think to ask. And so that gives a little bit of that engagement and personal connection. And it helps me to check in with them to find out what's going on. And along with that, I like to provide lots of ways for them to engage. So, they may engage by watching weekly wrap-up videos from me where I'm talking about what just happened and what's going to happen next. I put out enough announcements that they feel like, somebody's listening, somebody's watching. I try to grade their assignments quickly so they see that it's relevant, it's getting feedback. And I think all of those things put together makes it feel like a very engaging environment.
The reviews are in, and we can say definitively that that's one of the reasons that OT at EKU is one of the marquee programs. I mean, it's really not notorious, but it's definitely has a reputation for being very, very engaging with students in a very dynamic online and of course in-person environment as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, our faculty really work hard at that. They care a lot about the students, and I think it shines through.
Absolutely. The role of online teaching and learning, Dr. Howell, is growing at an exponential pace. And you and I have talked about this briefly before we even hit record here. Part of that is due to the pandemic, and partly because the natural progression of this online modality. How are you able to handle, or how are you able to blend a hands-on discipline like OT to this form of learning?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a challenge for any discipline that requires a lot of hands-on learning. And, before the pandemic, we didn't have to do it online. Our entry-level program, which is our program that is in person and students are learning to become an occupational therapist, that's really where they're getting those hands-on skills. But the pandemic forced us to move all of that online too. The entry-level program moved online, and we really had to rethink what actually requires hands-on to learn it. And I think that was good. It was a good push for our faculty to have to think about that and kind of rethink some assumptions. And our faculty got extremely creative with use of technology, things like video demonstrations, but then also having the students demonstrate their competencies back via technology. I think it was a fine line of using technology, but not overwhelming with that. And we were so lucky that most of our faculty already had extensive experience teaching at EKU online in our post-professional Doctor of Occupational Therapy program. And that program is actually more focused on leadership and growth as a professional. And so it doesn't really have the hands-on skill component. But the knowledge that the faculty have gained in teaching in the post-professional program helped them tremendously to translate that into the entry-level program during the pandemic. We were really fortunate that we knew what we were doing already.
Absolutely, yeah. Not having to build the plane as you fly it, so to speak,
Yeah,
is it makes life a little less stressful in a very stressful 18 months that we've all had.
for sure.
To delve deeper into that question, Dr. Howell, what kinds of students have success in our online courses? I know you have a range of students from undergrads to post-professional doctoral students. What attributes have you seen make for a solid online learner?
Yeah, I think we are so blessed in occupational therapy and occupational science to have just truly outstanding students at all levels, from undergraduate to doctoral. They really come here because they've got this passion about learning about occupational therapy. They want to become just an amazing occupational therapist, or they want to advance their career in occupational therapy. And I think that is something that really pays off as a learner. So they've got that investment in their own learning. And I just think that's crucial to really getting the most out of any educational program. But it especially helps in an online program because it allows them to sort of see the big picture and the end goal. They're not just checking off the box. They're looking at the big picture, and they don't get super bogged down in the nitty gritty. So that investment in learning is really crucial. I'm teaching a class right now, an online post-professional OTD course, and one of the students in my real-time office hours asked for just general advice for all of the students who are kind of at that point in their program. And I told them to enjoy it, like enjoy the learning. And I think they were kind of shocked. I think they were waiting for something a little less broad, I guess. But I think it's easy for a student to get tied up and bogged down in the nitty gritty of assignments and due dates and directions. But learning is really so much more than that. And it's an amazing gift that you give yourself to go on to take a program. And the students that really do best are the ones that are going to take advantage of that opportunity and appreciate the learning. And of course, time management and organization and attention to detail, those things all help too. But I think the investment in their own learning is one of the best qualities.
Do you find that your students learning that by and large, all of their faculty have been or are currently still working OTs in the profession? Does that create kind of a commonality there? I mean, I think having that practical experience is so beneficial for students to see that their teachers not only are real people who are doing this, but that they're doing this profession every day on some level.
Yeah, that's a great question. We laugh about it because the entry level students, the ones that are coming in and learning how to become an occupational therapist, they don't think that we are real OTs. They think we're just faculty, and they're always shocked when they sort of find out that, yeah, we do know what we're talking about. We do have a career, even if we're not working clinically right now, we still have that knowledge base. Sometimes they're a little slow to come around to that, and they want to see a guest lecturer who's a real OT. But the post-professional students, they are our colleagues. They are the ones out working as OTs, and they're so much fun to work with because they really get that we have both. We have the clinical experience and also the academic, and so they just they want to soak up the knowledge that we have. And as faculty, we appreciate that they have a tremendous amount of knowledge. They are in many cases master clinicians. They know far more about clinical work than I ever will. But they're learning from me something different about leadership or theory or whatever it is. And so I think when you have that mutual respect, it really makes for a nice student teaching colleague relationship.
Absolutely. What challenges and difficulties do your students encounter? You mentioned time management, and how are they able to mitigate those issues? And then on that same token, how does the faculty assist struggling students?
Yeah, I think sometimes our greatest strengths can also be our kind of our greatest weaknesses. And occupational therapists, I mean, we tend to be interested in everything. So we just want to learn about all kinds of things. OTs tend to be super busy. They have their hands in a lot of pots, really busy lives with work and family and organizations and volunteer work. And then on top of that, they tend to have very high personal and professional standards. Um, and so there's a lot of perfectionism and just a desire to do the very best. And so those are all admirable traits and great things, but it can also set people up to be spread really thin. And so, sometimes students will just kind of burn out or get very fatigued with the learning process. Almost all of our students at all levels are working, and certainly our post-professional OTD students are working full-time clinical jobs and then trying to do their coursework in the evenings and the weekends. So it's not a time management issue. I mean, these are people that are really good at managing their time. They're fitting it all in, and they're doing it really, really well, right up to the point they're not doing it well. And then, and that's where the problems start. And so, and sometimes they're even a little reluctant to ask for help or to reach out and say, I'm struggling, because they have this high personal standard of like, I've got to do it. I've got to do it all. So it kind of goes back to the engagement piece we talked about earlier. The faculty have to be on the lookout for that. We have to be empathetic to those busy lives, and just sometimes working with students to talk about what should they prioritize, not necessarily in their whole life, but in the class. That can be just a starting point. Sometimes they get very, I have to do all of these things, and the faculty are thinking, you actually have some options. We can work with you. We're able to extend a due date, or maybe we can help that you should read this but not that this week. I mean, we can help with those kinds of easy for us conversations, as long as we know that the student is struggling. So those are things that we walk through in office hours and advising. And sometimes just the conversation can put students at ease. And I just try to be very compassionate about all the things that they have going on in their lives. I've been a student too. I've got a few degrees, so I get it. I try to put myself in their shoes and take away the things that I can. Of course, we always, have resources we can refer students to as well that could be helpful, like counseling, even something like the library. Just referring someone to a librarian who can help them find the resources they need can be life-changing for somebody. So being aware of all of those things and being able to refer students to them.
From your perspective, Dr. Howell, how do you see the future of online education taking shape? Should we be encouraged and hopeful for its future, or should we be concerned?
I think encouraged. I mean, I remember there was a time when there was just a lot of stigma about online learning. I mean, that's been years ago, but it was like, oh, I got an online degree. Nobody wanted to say that. And now it's really become much more of the norm. I mean, I think the technology has come such a long way. And if anything good came out of this pandemic, it has pushed us even further in understanding what we can do online, what we can accomplish in these kinds of classes. So I think, just if we can get people past any remaining stigma about it being lower quality or not as good, when done correctly, online learning is dynamic and interactive, and it's a fantastic learning tool, and it helps so many people have access to education. So I think as the technology continues to advance, and as more and more of students, but also faculty, embrace that technology and learn how to use it and understand that type of pedagogy, then I think the future is really bright.
It's refreshing to hear. On that note too, I think, from speaking with some of our online coordinators and our recruitment folks, that the degree from EKU, whether it's online or on campus, there's not a difference in what that degree says.
Right.
And that's such a simple thing to tell people, but it is a very reassuring thing to hear that there's no, like you just said, there's no stigma about you getting that degree online, especially when we have, faculty and programs that are offering such an engaging and enriched experience.
Yeah, and it's so fun to now know graduates from our programs that are all over the country. They're not, sort of bound by the Kentucky borders or even the Richmond area borders. They're all over the place. And to be in a class where I've got students in California and Florida at the same time, it really is, we're all EKU kernels, we're all getting that focus on EKU education. And I think that's really exciting.
Absolutely. Uh, Switching gears a little bit, Dr. Howell, please tell us a little bit about your research interests, including being the founding editor of the Journal of Occupational Therapy Education.
Sure. I always laugh because my CV, I think I look a little bit like a crazy person because I have publications in a very wide variety of academic journals, not just occupational therapy. I've been really fortunate in my career to work with students from a lot of healthcare backgrounds. I have expertise in qualitative research methods. And so when I teach qualitative methods, what usually happens is that some of the students take the course and then I help them move their course assignment all the way to publication. And so that's how I end up with a lot of random publications. But I've collaborated on research with, occupational therapists, but also physical therapists, athletic trainers, speech and language pathologists. And their topics might be out of my comfort zone a bit, but the methods and the writing is my input on those projects. And so that's been really rewarding to work with students and move them forward. I don't do as much of my own research anymore. I'm more about the mentorship piece. And then, of course, the Journal of Occupational Therapy Education takes up a lot of my time. We call it JOTE. I'm really proud of JOTE. I'm happy to talk about it. I'm glad you asked me about it because we're so proud of it. So about, 6 years ago, one of my colleagues, Cindy Hayden, said, is anybody interested in starting an OT education journal? And two of us, myself and Renee Kazi-Upton, we raised our hands and said, sure, we'll give it a try. So we spent about a year trying to figure out if there was a need for this journal and how we would start it. And we were extremely fortunate to hook up with our EKU library partners. I can't say enough good things about the EKU librarians. They set us up with bPress and Encompass, and they help provide some support for our journal, the infrastructure and the costs. So we started JOTE 5 years ago. And since then we have, we're in our 5th volume. We publish quarterly. Each issue has around 15 to 18 articles. It's a fully open access peer-reviewed journal. And we only publish occupational therapy education research. It's been a huge need in our profession. We were one of the few allied health professions that didn't already have an education journal. And a lot of OT faculty are publishing scholarship of teaching and learning research. And so they needed this place to publish, and JOTE has really become that place. So, we now are international. We've published articles from all over the world. I looked this morning and we have over 56,000 downloads in the 5 years we've been going. So I usually don't brag on myself too much, but I will brag on myself and Cindy and Renee because we have really created this from the ground up and it has become bigger than we could have ever imagined. It's just been a really super rewarding experience.
Well, you can brag on yourself a little bit. That's okay. Congratulations. That's a huge explosion of engagements. 56,000. That's a lot, and to be international, phenomenal. I do love that you shouted out our librarians too. That they have that constant gag that they're pathetically eager to help, but having that level of research just at our fingertips here on campus is just and people willing to collaborate. It's phenomenal.
They are outstanding, and they really are just sort of quiet warriors in the background. They don't draw attention to themselves. I shout out about them every time I get a chance because we would not have been able to do this without them, and that there's no question about that. They are a huge support to us.
Absolutely. If you had to give an elevator speech to a handful of prospective OT students, Dr. Howell, and you had about 60 seconds to tell them why they should become occupational therapists, what do you say? And then if you had to convince occupational therapists to return to school for their doctorate, what do you say to them?
Okay, well, I always start with defining what occupational therapy is because people just don't know. So occupation is, in the way we define it, is not really about vocation. It's more about the things that you do that occupy your time. So from the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night, you're doing all kinds of things that are important and meaningful to you. You're working, you're being a student, but you're also having fun, and you're doing the more mundane things like getting yourself ready in the morning and making a meal and things like that. And so an occupational therapist helps people when they've had an injury or an illness or a disability. It could be physical, mental, psychosocial. When you can't do the things that are important to you, an occupational therapist will help you find a way to be more independent and functional and to have a good quality of life. And so come be an OT. We use a lot of problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, because every person you interact with is going to have a different need and a different meaningful occupation that they're trying to return to. And so it's fun. Every day is an adventure, and you get to really help people's lives be improved. And I think that's really rewarding. So and then if you're already an OT and you're thinking about coming back to school, I think it's such a great opportunity to revisit the concepts you learned in school the first time, but with the lens of experience. And sometimes you don't appreciate it when you're going through it the first time, but when you come back, you can really start to apply information in a different way and fall back in love with occupational therapy, while at the same time moving your career forward, taking on new leadership roles and becoming a change agent. That's something we talk a lot about in our doctoral program, is that we want our graduates to be change agents, and they're going out and improving the profession, through the leadership roles they take on, policy changes, advocacy, becoming a more of a evidence-based practitioner. There's just a lot of ways that people can make change in the profession in a positive way that also meets their professional goals and their passions and interests and values. So come on back to school.
As you work with a myriad of students with diverse backgrounds and experiences, are you encouraged or discouraged in what the future holds for the world of occupational science and occupational therapy?
Yeah, I guess I would answer that with a little bit of both. This discouraged part is just that healthcare in general is a really hard environment right now. The climate is tough for all healthcare workers. Obviously coming out of a pandemic, that was a really hard time for healthcare workers. Some lost their jobs, some kept their jobs, but it was very dangerous. That's challenging. But even without the pandemic, the productivity expectations, the payment models, the competition for services, there's just a lot of things that make healthcare hard right now. And it can be discouraging. Again, I think that's where our Doctor of Occupational Therapy program is helping me feel more encouraged, because we're sending graduates out that are helping to change some of that. They're advancing the field in a lot of different ways. So I think that's encouraging. And I think the other encouraging aspects are that occupational therapy is becoming more well known. I meet more and more people who understand what it is. We've been around over 100 years. People don't realize that. They sometimes think we're a new profession, but we've been around a long, long time. And so I think as the word continues to get out, that's very encouraging. And I haven't really talked about occupational science in this interview, but occupational science is our foundational discipline. So the study of occupation and the meaning of occupation is really important to the clinical practice of occupational therapy. And occupational science is really coming into its own right now and gaining more traction. So I think that's really encouraging as well.
Absolutely. We've said it once or twice in this interview, but you are a very busy person who wears multiple hats and has a lot of irons in the fire. If you could, Dr. Howell, please share with our listeners a little bit about your personal interests, and if you have spare time, what is it you like to do in your spare time?
Well, yeah, I actually do like to read quite a bit, but since we started Jode, I do not do nearly as much reading for pleasure. I read a lot of articles, but I guess that's pleasurable too. So maybe working on Jode is one of my interests. Um, but I also like to stay active. I really enjoy hiking. I like to walk my dogs and take her on hikes. I like to travel, and if I can combine hiking and travel, that's even better. So for example, I've hiked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. So I did some hiking in New Zealand, and I think that's a lot of fun to just get out and explore the world. And I like to do yoga and spend time with my family, and just kind of get out and see the world.
And hopefully the world is opening back up to allow us all to do some of those things again. It's been feels like we've all been cooped up for quite some time. So
I know my yoga studio closed in the pandemic, but another one has just opened and I've started going back, and it's so nice. I mean, I had been doing it online during the pandemic, but it's just so wonderful to be back. Yeah.
it is we've all missed each other. It's so funny how quickly we acclimated to this isolation, and it's taking a little longer to acclimate back into being together again, but
That's true.
definitely on the horizon. Dr. Howell, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Well, I just say, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're, thinking that you might like to return to school and try an online program, I just encourage you to reach out, get more information from whatever program you're interested in. It doesn't hurt to ask questions and gather information. And sometimes, just the spark of an idea can turn into something really transformative in your life. So anything new can be scary until you get out there and do it. And just keep in mind that the faculty here at EKU, we're here to help you. We're here to engage with you and help you to reach your goals. So, give it a chance. Come on back to school. We'd love to have you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Howell. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. It feels like it's been forever since I've seen your face, so that's a delight in and of itself. But I look forward to getting back into the studio with you all and being able to produce some content on campus.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure today.